Welcome to Business Notes. I'm your host, Diane Bogino. Our guest today is Robb Breding. Robb is the founder and chief evangelist of REV Advisory Group, a consulting and coaching company committed to assisting growth-minded business leaders evaluate, develop, and engage top talent using science and a proven process. With over 30 years of business leadership and performance coaching experience, Robb brings a unique combination of real-world experience and best-in-class solutions to the table. REV's philosophy around talent management can be summed up in one sentence. We are at our best when we are doing work we enjoy with people we trust to accomplish something that matters. Robb, welcome to Business Notes, and thank you for being on the show today.
Well, it's very good to be here, Diane. Thank you.
Yes. Robb, in the introduction, I mentioned about your unique background, so I'd like for you to tell our audience about yourself and about that unique background of yours.
Diane, thank you for that. It's good to be here. And so my background, I haven't, a lot of folks in this world that I now preside in have spent a lot of time in this, just doing coaching and consulting work. And my background really is in business. So I was in retail for about 30 years. Started out with Sears and Roebuck and Company, and later started a wireless phone company with my brother. Ran a real estate company, and lots of different kind of business ownership experiences. And of course, there was a lot of people involved because I had retail companies, and so just have a passion for people, and developed through that time in retail, and now taking that to the consulting world. So.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you do have a long history of corporate and entrepreneurial leadership, but what made you decide to get into the coaching and consulting world?
Well, so we sold, my brother and I owned a wireless phone company here in the Midwest. So I live in Minnesota, in the Minneapolis area. And in 2014, we sold that business. And I guess I don't know exactly how old, I think it was like 42 years old. So certainly not at an age where I was going to retire, and certainly had a lot of fire in my belly. And so I found myself not knowing what those next things were. I just figured I'd start a new business. But then my wife, actually right after we sold, was diagnosed with breast cancer. Yeah. And so that was, if you've ever experienced that, or know somebody who has, it's a process. The treatment process was about a year of hell. And then on the other side of that year, after going through chemotherapy, radiation treatment, and surgeries, my wife came out of her final surgery for reconstruction, and we found out that she had heart failure. So the 1 year of hell turned into 2 years of hell. And at the end of that second year, I just about lost her to heart failure. And miraculously, she recovered. It's just, I live in Minneapolis, where there's some of the best doctors in the world, and we're kind of known for medicine, and I believe, the doctors and the Lord in heaven really saved my wife. And so that experience really reorientated me, which, in my work with assessments and with coaching, we have those experiences in life sometimes that kind of shake us up. And so not that was like my impetus for getting into coaching and consulting work, but it really changed my kind of outlook on what I wanted to do. And I wanted what I did to be more significant. And so that's kind of how I started down this path of organizational development, and around this passion of trying to match people up and help them find their natural talents and function in them. Because I don't know, life's too short. And, I think we should enjoy what we do. And then I also know that when we enjoy what we do, we just do it so much better. So.
That's for sure. And I hope your wife's doing well now.
She is. She's doing really well. It's a really wonderful story in hindsight.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's hindsight's 2020, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad she's doing better. And yes, it does take some hard life experiences sometimes to bonk us over the head and wake us up to what our true passion might be. And on your website, your marketing materials all stress the words using science and a proven process. So I'd like for you to tell our audience a little bit about that, if you would.
So just maybe even to take you a little bit further. So as I began to kind of get engaged with the, what I might do to help people as opposed to make money, which is what I used to think about, that I met several people along the way. And the first person I met was a man by the name of John Perry. And he had an assessment device really that he had developed himself called the JPEA. And he would assess a person, but he could also assess a role, and he could also assess an environment, and then he would combine those different assessments to kind of give you a really good picture of what engagement looked like for an individual or for an organization. And so he was consulting using that tool kind of at the core of he would diagnose with that tool, and then he had these applications around team coaching and individual coaching that he would do. And so that was kind of my first exposure to, what some science, I guess, so to speak. And then I worked with him for a little while, and he called on like big government and large corporations. And boy, I just didn't really like that. I was a small business guy at my peak in my companies. I had 250 employees, and I just liked the smaller business. It wasn't such a bureaucracy. People were more adapt. And then of course, small businesses go through a lot of inflection points when it comes to organizational complexity. And so that's really what got me interested in the science side of it was John. And then later I was introduced to Robb Hiller, who you and I have as a mutual friend. And he introduced me to TTI Insights assessment devices. And so that took my assessment understanding and science understanding to a whole new level. And I had never seen anything like that before, where there were combining sciences. John's assessment was a motivational assessment, so it kind of did get at kind of part of the person. But what I learned from Robb Hiller is that that was more like an X-ray, and really what Robb was doing was an MRI, and that foundationally really helped to be able to diagnose and get at some of the engagement issues, development issues that I wanted to solve, that I wanted to help people to solve. And so the science part of it is that assessment and the TTI science is really at the core of what I'm doing as a coach and as an organizational development consultant. The process part of it really came out of my heart, John Perry's, and Robb's. I mean, this is an alignment that we have. And I actually have a saying that I think encapsulates it quite well. And that is that, we're at our best when we're doing work we enjoy with people we trust to accomplish something that matters. And so that's the trifecta of engagement. And so our process, what that does is we first of all help people to identify their natural talents. What am I really naturally good at? And then not try to change that, but try to show them how to lean into those talents to become excellent at whatever that is that they're trying to do in life. And of course, those passions aren't hard to align. We know what we love and what we enjoy. I kind of shared my story about how I kind of came to that conclusion. But and then after they've done that, there's one other thing that I learned from Robb is that there's a difference between what we naturally are good at and the skills that we bring to the table. So the skills kind of come out of experience and things that we learn. And so then the next step in our proven process is really to help them to identify those skills, those things that they could hone that are really going to make a difference. And again, help them to achieve excellence. It's the second habit of excellence that we talk about. And then the final piece to the process is engaging others. And so we have some really intentional ways that we work with our coaching and clients and with organizations and how to engage others to accelerate our development and our pathway towards excellence, and how important relationships and other people are in getting us from point A to point B. So a lot of times when I'm working with an organization, they want to see, my favorite person to work with is an emerging executive, somebody who, emerging talent, right? They're kind of not a tabula rasa, but they're on their way up, right? And so the company wants to see that person get from here to here. And so our process accelerates that. And I haven't coined it, I don't know if I want to say it on that, but I have I call it talent acceleration. And I've actually got some things that I'm calling talent accelerator. That's the process. So yeah, so that, I don't know if that encapsulates it, but those are the kind of the three things that encapsulate our proven process there. So
Yeah, great. Yeah, great. Yeah, I love that term because people are trying to build their careers too, and that's a great way to help them do that. So, what are some of the issues that you do help business leaders solve?
well, that's a great question, actually. Engagement with me and with Rev, can happen in a lot of different ways. But usually, maybe the initial thing is that a business owner, they own a company. Maybe they've got somewhere between 25 and that 250 employees. It's kind of a lot of my clients. I do have some larger ones, but they're frustrated or they're overwhelmed in the C-suite or at the top of the organization. And usually when I talk to them, what I find is that it has to do with people. Okay. Organizational complexity is creeping up on them. What got them to the level of success that their company is at is not the same, thing that's going to get them to the next level. And so usually it's that conversation that kind of gets us started down a pathway of, okay, well, what do we need to do here to get you to a place where your people are coming alongside you and helping to accelerate the growth that you're having versus creating all this frustration and anxiety for the leader. And so that's really what I look for. I look for that emotion. And then once I find it, then I can ask some good questions, which again, I learned from Robb Hiller because he's a great question asker, and find out what the problems are. And it might look like we use it several different ways of how that might start, but that's how we find out if we can help or not.
Right. Uh, Rob, how do you think turbulent times like this change leadership?
It's certainly like any other kind of adversity. We find out what we're made of, I think, to some extent. It tests the resiliency of the leader and of the organization. And so when that stress is brought from the outside, those internal dysfunctions can really come to the surface. And so, when COVID initially hit, the first reaction some of my clients had was to kind of back away from, training and development, right? And the idea of, wait a minute, we don't know, before we were on this trajectory this way, we're not sure now. But after just a short period of time, there was a real need for some of the things that we were doing with their team to ensure that they would continue that trajectory, or it was going to, things could unravel quickly. So
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And to that point, what skills do you think that leaders will need going forward now? How is that going to change for them?
I think COVID has been a disruption, but there certainly has been a compression of talent resources in the market in general, right? So there's this competition for the best of the best, right? We want the best people in our organization. And so I think the organizations, the differentiator, and I guess I would agree with Patrick Lencioni on this, a famous guy who writes about teamwork, is that, it's that organizational kind of health piece. And what that means is that organizations are consciously, proactively developing their organization, the people side of their business, and that they're paying attention to fitting the right people with the right roles so that engagement level can be high. And when that happens, people love their work, they're more productive. Just yesterday, I have a business leader group that I met with, and one of the gentlemen does a podcast. He's an attorney, and he does a podcast on different topics sometimes they get into employment law, which is interesting to me. And he was talking about this notion of unlimited vacation, for example. And so that brings up the topic of engagement, right? And so what companies are finding that are implementing these programs like this is that, when employees are very well engaged and are responsible and accountable for the results that they're getting, you don't have to worry about them, taking 3 months of vacation. You know what I mean? They don't want to do that. They enjoy their work. They're being productive, and they frankly, they want to contribute. And so there needs to be a trust relationship, I think, between employer and employee. I think that's going to be another key. this autocratic kind of not slavery, but you know what I mean? It's this idea of that you just work for me kind of a mentality is a thing of the past. It's not going to work for companies going forward into the future. So
that's true. Absolutely. Now, Robb, you studied psychology, sociology, and business when you were in school. And I can just hear your father saying, son, you cannot be successful with psychology and sociology. So did you have some vision at a young age? Because those are exactly the things that we need today. Tell us a little bit about what made you study those three topics.
Yeah, that's good. And maybe I could have answered this, and when you asked me about how my journey a little bit, but so when I actually grew up in Minot, North Dakota, which is not a large town, certainly not the metropolitan area of Minneapolis. And Minneapolis isn't really a big city, but it's a city. And so anyway, my upbringing was quite troubled, and I'll just leave it at that. I got into a little trouble when I was young. My mom and dad split up, but the good news about that is, and that, I would say like age 10, 12 to 16, let's say, was a really, I don't know how much trouble you can get in 4 years, but I got in a lot of trouble. Okay. And good thing about it is a mentor, he's passed away now, but he became my brother-in-law, got a hold of me, and I met the Lord, I guess you'd say. I had a conversion, and it changed my life. So I was kind of headed down. I mean, a lot of my buddies that during that time frame did end up in jail or dead. But my trajectory changed completely at that point, and at a young age, fortunately. So I didn't get into it impacting my vocational life and those kinds of things. But that stuck with me, right? That experience as a child. And so when I emerged from high school, my initial thought was I was going to be a youth pastor. Okay. And so the trajectory there, so I studied youth ministry. I did that for a couple of years. I moved my young wife. I've been married for 33 years. And her and I were 19 years old when we got married. And I took her in my sophomore year to Cleveland, Tennessee, which was about 1,800 miles away, and literally like going to another country, okay, compared to North Dakota. So that only lasted a year. And so when I moved her back to our hometown where we both were from, and I switched degrees from youth ministry to psychology, thinking that I was going to go down the track of youth counseling and become a counselor. And so while I was doing that, I started working at Sears, and while I was in school. And that's where I kind of started to realize, wow, I really enjoy, business. And I was identified quite early, actually, in the organization. Our store was in Minot, was doing a big remodel, so there was a lot of corporate people in and out. And so they identified me as this high potential person. And they actually approached me within 2 years about becoming, a management trainee and kind of going through a track. And so with only 6 credits of college to finish, I had already switched around my major a little bit to add the business component that you see there, but I quit school, not quit, but I stopped to take a promotion and go down that track, and then Sears helped me to finish my degree. And that's kind of how this nexus between, my love for people and wanting to see, things, people achieve excellence and not go in the wrong path like I was going. That was more from a moral standpoint. But then as I got into business, I realized, it's all tied together, and not all of us have the same advantages in life starting out. So when I get a hold of a young executive, I mean, I really have a heart to see them, get from point A to point B for a lot of different reasons, not just to help my client, but to help them. So, yeah.
What does a typical engagement with REV look like?
Well, like I was telling you, once I've identified that there's a need, if we're not a fit for everybody, we do look for that pain that the client's experiencing, but we also look for a fit. The individual needs to have a growth mindset, and then there's really a couple of different on-ramps. One in particular is turnover. Okay, so like they're experiencing turnover in key roles possibly. I usually am pretty good at getting them to understand how much that's costing them, and so we might start with an engagement around benchmarking. So I do a lot of benchmarking, and what that looks like is we come into the organization and we talk to the different stakeholders that understand a role within the organization. And then we create a scientific benchmark using that science to create some markers and things that we're going to look for in a candidate. And so typically organizations are very good at resume and job description comparison. Some of them are even good at interviewing, but there's an objective component to fit and an objective component to skill evaluation that the science brings. And so we help them to integrate that into the process, and then helping them to assess candidates against this benchmark. And a lot of times that is the entree, like into an organizational engagement. Once they've onboarded that candidate, now they've got this science as a foundation. The onboarding process, the development process of that candidate, we continue to use that science. And sometimes, and more often than not, we'll get involved in coaching if it's at an executive level. So we might coach that same individual up in their role using science and our proven process that I described earlier. Other times it's maybe they're growing. It's another example. So a company's growing, and I mentioned what got them there is not going to get them to the next place. So they've got some of these leaders that are in middle management roles that now have more and more responsibility, and they really need to determine whether or not this is the person that's going to be able to take them to the next level in that role. And if they are, they probably need some coaching and some development. And if they're not, we can help them just figure that out too, and be able to keep that person functioning. Because a lot of times these are loved people, right? They've been there from the start. And so they don't want to fire them. They don't want to just say, oh, the company's outgrown you. So we help them to find ways to integrate them into the organization and keep them in a place of functionality that they're going to enjoy and be able to continue to contribute. And then, of course, we'll help them to figure out how to map out what that new leadership team is going to look like. And again, it's a lot of one-on-one coaching. Sometimes it's team coaching. In that scenario I was just describing, we have done where we're engaged with a team that's, the leadership team, but now they're bigger, they've grown. So we're coaching the team as a whole. And then there's some individuals maybe on that team that I'm working with one-on-one throughout that process as well. So those are some examples of things that we do and can help with. So
great. And being the unique person you are, you also have a unique way for people to get in touch with you. So tell us about that.
Well, the best way to reach out to me is, well, there's really two ways. If you want to just reach out directly and have a conversation, you can go, I think you're going to share the web link there, and just, put in your information there, and you click a button and it'll give you my calendar, and we can do a quick 20-minute chat. That's how I like to get introduced. Another way, if you'd like to, is I do have an online survey. So if you own a business and you want to see, if you qualify for some of the services that, maybe you're a good candidate, maybe you got some of that pain I was talking about, or some of those emotions that we were talking about, you can go and there's a survey that you can take. And then if you qualify, we actually provide anybody who qualifies a free 45-minute strategy session. And so that's where we would ask those good questions. And whether or not you work with us or not, that is a really, really good process to go through. And, we'll leave you with, you'll be thinking when you leave the strategy session, and hopefully, that will determine whether or not, we'd be a good fit, or maybe down the road, you might need something. So that's how that looks. Yeah. Right. Those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Well, good. And, Rob, you make me think of the saying, it's lonely at the top, but you bring so much information and great tools and that proven process to leaders. And I hope from this video and this interview, they know they don't have to go it alone. They can call you. And I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Diane, for having me. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for watching Business Notes. We've been speaking with Robb Breding, founder and chief evangelist of REV Advisory Group. I'm your host, Diane Bogino, bringing you business ideas you can bank on.